Hello everyone. Today we are going to read our next chapter, Culture and Science in the Ancient Period. India has a rich and varied culture. Every dynasty that ruled India added something to her heritage. Literature. The Vedas and associated texts. The Vedas are the earliest literary works that we have. The word Veda means knowledge. There are four Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sam Veda, and Atharva Veda. They contain hymns in praise of different gods and goddesses. These hymns were passed from one generation to the next orally until they were finally written down much later. Along with the Vedas, there are a series of texts called the Brahmanas. They are commentaries on the Vedas. Each Veda has a separate Brahmana. There are also 108 Upanishads. The essence of Vedanta philosophy is contained in these Upanishads. Puranas. Puranas are sacred literature. There are 18 surviving Puranas. The law books, Dharma Shastras, are also a part of ancient Indian literature. The Buddhist and Jain texts also form a part of Indian literature. The Jatak tales are stories about the previous births of Lord Buddha. The epics. The Mahabharata was composed by sage Vedvyas. It is the story of two sets of cousins, the Kauravas and the Pandavas. The name comes from the battle of Mahabharata fought between the two. The Mahabharata also included the Bhagavad Gita. It is the conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjun on the battlefield. The Ramayana was composed by sage Valmiki. It is the story of Ram, a prince of Koshal. Capital was Ayodhya, and his war with Ravana, the king of Lanka. Do in class. Read stories from either the Mahabharata or the Ramayana. Secular literature. The Arthashastra, Indica, Harshcharita, stories from the Jatakas, and the Panchatantra, the works of Kalidasa, and the accounts of foreign travelers are the important secular works of this period. The Sangam literature also belongs to this category. The Arthashastra and the Indica were written by Kautilya and Megasthenes respectively. The Arthashastra describes the political system of the time and the art of governance. It gives information on the political and military administration of the Mauryas. Similarly, the Indica tells us about the political, social, and economic conditions during the Mauryan dynasty. Megasthenes has also described the city of Patliputra. See the box on page 75. Megasthenes' description of Patliputra. At the meeting of the river Ganga and another is situated Palibotra, a city 80 stadia in length and 15 in breadth. It is of the shape of a parallelogram and is girded with a wooden wall pierced with loopholes for the discharge of arrows. It has a ditch in front for defense and for receiving the sewage of the city. Harshcharita is another valuable literary source. It was written by Banbhat and contains the description of the early life of King Harshvardhan. Kalidasa lived during the reign of the Gupta kings. He is considered one of the greatest poets and dramatists of India. He has written many poems and plays in Sanskrit. His famous works include Meghduta, Raghuvansh, Ritu Samhara, Abhijana Shakuntalam, and Kumar Sambhav. Foreign travelers. Many travelers and pilgrims came to India. Fayan came during the reign of Chandragupta II. He spent 6 years 405 to 411 CE in India visiting Buddhist monasteries. When he went back, he wrote an account of his stay. His account gives a detailed description of the life of the people under the Gupta kings. 2 centuries later, Yuan Sang came to India. He wrote about the conditions in those times. The ruler in the north was Harshvardhan. I Singh was another Chinese traveler to come to India. The Sangam text. The Sangam literature was written in Tamil. It mentions the kingdoms of South India. The Silapadikaram and the Manimekalai are famous Tamil epics. Art and architecture. Architecture. A large number of stupas, chaityas, worship halls, viharas, and temples were constructed. Thousands of craftsmen worked day and night to build and decorate these structures. Many stupas were built. Stupas are dome shaped structures where relics of the Buddha and Buddhist monks were kept. The Great Stupa at Sanchi and the Dhamak Stupa at Sarnath are masterpieces. Another magnificent stupa is at Amravati in Andhra Pradesh. The stupa at Bharut is also famous. All these stupas were surrounded with railings and had many gateways. The railings and gateways were decorated with sculptures depicting events from the life of the Buddha. A beautifully sculpted chaitya is located at Karli near Pune. Viharas or monasteries were places where the Buddhist monks lived. Some monasteries were in the form of huge caves cut into hills. They were also decorated with sculptures. Many temples were also built. The cave temples at Ajanta are very famous. The Dashavatar temple at Devgarh near Jhansi, the temple of Bhitargaon near Kanpur, and the temple at Sanchi are very beautiful. They were constructed of brick and stone. The kingdoms of the south were also famous for temples. The Chalukyas built stone temples dedicated to Vishnu and Shiva at Vatapi, Aihole, and Pattadakal. They also built many Buddhist monasteries. The Rath temple and the Shore temple at Mahabalipuram and the Kailashnath temple at Kanchi were built by the Pallavas. Most of the temples constructed during this period had some common structures. These were as under: Garbhagriha. It was the room where the image of the chief deity was kept. Shikhar or Viman. It was a tower on top of the Garbhagriha to mark it out as a sacred place. Mandap. It was an assembly hall where people assembled and prayed. Sculpture. The earliest sculpted objects were perhaps made by Neolithic men. They were, however, very crude. The Indus Valley people used mud and clay to make objects. During Mauryan rule, numerous stone pillars were constructed. These pillars were carved out of rock and had metal-like polish. Some of them had animals carved on top. The lion capital from the pillar at Sarnath is very beautiful. The art of sculpture developed further with the growth of the Gandhar and the Mathura schools of art. Many images of the Buddha and the Mahavira were made by the sculptors of these two schools. The Buddhist monasteries of the Gupta period contain beautiful stone sculptures. One of the finest examples is the statue of the seated Buddha from Sarnath. It shows the Buddha preaching the Dharma. The halo signifies his spiritual strength. The Pallavas and the Chalukyas were also patrons of sculpture. Mahabalipuram has many sculptures carved on rock. The most famous is the Descent of the Ganges, also called Arjuna's Penance. Painting. The history of painting in India goes back to the Old Stone Age. Many prehistoric paintings have been found in the caves at Bhimbetka. During the Gupta period, the walls of the cave monasteries at Ajanta were decorated with beautiful paintings. These paintings, called murals, depict events from the life of the Buddha. Colors made from natural materials were used in these paintings. That is why these paintings have retained their glow even after so many centuries. Every year, thousands of people come to see these paintings. They marvel at the skill of the artist who created such masterpieces. Think and answer. What source of light did the artists use while painting these? Science. Science was advanced in ancient India. The town planning of the Indus cities was based on scientific principles. Knowledge of medicine improved largely due to the efforts of Charak and Sushrut. Charak wrote the Charak Samhita. Sushrut was a specialist in cosmetic surgery. He performed thousands of operations, particularly the reconstruction of the nose. Dhanvantri was a general physician. The science of astronomy was also highly advanced. Romak Siddhant is an important work on astronomy. Aryabhat and Varamihir were well-known mathematicians and astronomers. Aryabhat wrote a book called Aryabhatiyam in Sanskrit. In it, he stated that the earth moves around the sun as well as on its axis. The rotation of the earth on its axis caused day and night. He also explained why and how eclipses occur. He found a mathematical method of calculating the circumference of a circle. Vara Mihir wrote an encyclopedia of science called the Brihad Samhita. Indian mathematicians knew the use of zero. They had a special symbol for it. Later, this system of counting was adopted by the Arabs and the Europeans. The iron pillar at Mehroli in Delhi is a proof of the skill of the Indian craftsmen. It was constructed over 1600 years ago during the reign of the Guptas. The pillar is made of iron. It is 7.2 meters high and weighs around 6.5 tons. It is known as the rustless wonder because despite being exposed to the sun and rain for all these centuries, it has not rusted. This was our chapter Culture and Science in the Ancient Period. If you want links to other chapters also, you can find them in the description box below. Thank you everyone.